Hello world of YouTube. I want to get up front and apologize for how sloppy this list week has been, but I've also just sitting down and making these videos has not really been something that I've been creatively invested in. I really had fun with the games one, but filming all of the other ones that have not seen the light of day has just not been going well. I don't know if it's because this is something that I don't really want to do right now creatively, or because I just don't want to look back on 2021 really, or I'm just really excited to bring you 2022 stuff. I don't know which it could be. It could be a little bit of all three. I really don't know, but I figured if I was gonna do the bare minimum for list week, I would at least give you guys my best albums since I gave you guys my best games of 2021, but I am going to give you the 20 albums, and I will have a list of 50 linked in the description. Now, before I get into the list, my opinions on the year in 2021 in music, outside of my own personal headspace, I feel like I'm not going to walk away from 2021 with as many records as I have in certain years past. There will be stuff that I know I'll hold on to, and it's the stuff that really resonated with me. But even when sitting down to make a top 50, there was records that I really liked and I was happy to put on there. But there were very few where I was like, yeah, that one, absolutely, that one, of course, that one. Even though I gave more 10s than I have in recent memory. I don't know. Maybe my headspace was tangential to that feeling. But while there was stuff I liked, I don't know how much of it's going to linger. Without further ado, though, let's get to my list of my top 20 favorite albums of 2021. Death from Above 1979's fourth record, Is for Lovers, was, I feel like, a little bit of a slept-on record this year. I think that these guys kept it really consistent on this project, like they did on Outrageous Now. I know that the production change could have been a little disengaging for some folks, but I thought it made their bass riffs a little more punchier, while keeping their drums just as thunderous as ever. I think that some of the grooves they settle in on here are really nice, sort of continuing some of the more slower pacing scene on Outrageous Now. I think some of that tongue-in-cheek lyrical edge that they've always kind of had but felt really prevalent on that record also carries well into Is for Lovers. This just sees them sort of transitioning a little bit in a way that I think works incredibly well. And as a fan of these guys, I'm happy to see the future that these guys are paving for themselves personally.
Wake up out the bed, wrap my do-rag up, say a prayer, I'm thanking God that Mom Dukes had us.
Now, while I haven't reviewed it yet, and I did like his first album this year that he dropped, King's Disease 2, I think that the conciseness and the beats on Magic are just a bit better than the beats on King's Disease 2. Nas also has some really good flows on the project that show like a youthfulness and energy that is really good to see him channel at this time in his career. You know, he sounds hungrier on this than he did on Pockets of King's Disease 2, which I feel like is kind of the point. You know, King's Disease 2 felt like a victory lap. King's Disease, I feel like, was a really good outing with Nas and Hit Boy. It showed that they had chemistry from a rapper-producer perspective, and King's Disease 2 was just more of that. There were some features I didn't like as much as on King's Disease 1. By and large, I feel like King's Disease 1's feature list is more well-rounded, but I like on Magic how it's just tight, lean, good beats, great bars from Nas, and some fun moments in there as well, like the DJ Premier feature as well. I think A$AP Rocky, when he comes in, is really good. I think that Magic is a victory lap in and of itself, but it's a tight, concise one. It shows that a dude that a lot of people still consider a GOAT, myself included, can still channel a really good pocket in, again, at this point in his career, and it's just incredible. But it was a great surprise to happen later on in this year. While I slammed it for having some prog wank throughout it, I still feel like Hushed and Grim shows Mastodon throttling in this dark pocket that's loomed over them for the last couple of releases incredibly well. I think that the adaptations they make and influences they inject that are fairly fresh for these guys show that even though they're, again, kind of later on in their career, at least they've been around for a while, they can still find ways to adapt new ideas, take some fun inspiration in there, and throw it into their sludgy prog sound. And I feel like songwriting-wise, this is more excellence from a band that's been through a lot of shit. For a band that I love so very much, I'm happy to see these guys still channeling a lot of really good ideas that challenge them creatively. And I feel like they, again, knocked it out of the park on Hushed and Grim personally.
My annihilation! My annihilation!
Another record I haven't reviewed that came out relatively late in the year, Every Time I Die's Radical, their first album, in a decent amount of time, sees them, similarly to Mastodon, in just a dark, bleak place. A lot of the imagery on here is fantastical or just grand in scope and coded in misery and darkness. And I feel like, again, these guys show that while they've been around for a while, they can still cut their teeth so very well. A lot of the sounds on here are so kinetic and frenzied that kept me super engaged. I really like what these guys were crafting on here, and I feel like the juxtaposition between the bright, shiny album art and some of the real darkness and anger within creates a good clash. You know, I think that it's gritty, it's raw, it's got so much bite to it. You know, I loved having it in my later in the year rotation. I think that it's got that same amount of fun and pockets sonically that these guys channel really well. It's just got a decent amount of bleakness in there lyrically that I think, again, feels kind of fitting, but these guys use really well to cement the listener in a good pocket on Radical.
I'm trying to roll, I'm trying to ride.
You guys know this was going to be here. A collaboration for the ages that was hyped up for like almost a year. Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak on Silk Sonic. A project that is easily one of the best produced, one of the smoothest, silkiest, funky, soulful records. Production on here, aces, almost put it at a 9 alone. But the tightness that's here, it's in and it's out. It's sultry, it's chill, it's lax. It's a kind of vibe that amidst all the darkness and anger or depression looming in the air for me was a good vignette into some comfort, some nice, warm feeling sounds that also got some funk and, you know, sex in there that work really, really well. I think that these guys have incredible chemistry. You guys know I like Anderson .Paak. You guys know I think Bruno's at his best when he's copying sounds that aren't from anywhere near this decade. And I think that the addition of Bootsy Collins and Thundercat add a lot of flavor into the mix that I think works incredibly well. This is easily a well-renowned recipe for success. And I think that these two gave the world a nice hug in a way that was certainly needed after, you know, darkness and depression looming in the back.
Call me when you want, call me when you need, call me in the morning, I'll be on the way, call me.
Tangential to that, Lil Nas X's debut Montero was bop after bop after bop that also had a lot of brightness in it and empowerment in a way that, again, I feel like the world kind of needed. You know, the production on here is so pristinely done. A lot of the hook work on here, fantastic. Similarly to Silk Sonic, it's kind of in and it's out in a way that I would expect nothing less from Lil Nas X, a dude that has mastered the craft of short, colossal pop tunes. You know, I never made the Song of the Year video, but Montero was very, very high up there for me. I think a lot of the sentiments on here, while they may have like a bittersweet tinge to them, there's this sense of empowerment to it that I think Lil Nas X owns. And I am so happy to see him pull together a debut that is so fantastic and is, again, textbook great pop music, in my opinion. Like I said, this record has done nothing but grow on me. The dark gothic tones that John Carpenter's crafting on Lost Themes 3 feel the most concise and well conceptualized out of the entire trilogy thus far. I feel like He's finding ways to integrate some of that hard rock influence from Lost Themes 2 really well into the darkness and shadows scene from Lost Themes 1. I feel like the overall gothic tones and keyboard textures sound immaculate on here. You know, there's some good grooves in there as well. There's some good dance-filled bops to shake the graveyard throughout the night. This is a really good soundtrack to have throughout any fall season, and if you've slept on it, I highly suggest, once the air starts to crisp, throw this on and just wrap yourself in to those ambient synthetic tones that John Carpenter crafts oh so very well.
Woke up on the West Coast for the first time in my life. Drove cross country, but I remember the...
If you guys remember last year, the album Shrines was my deeper dive introduction into Arm & Hammer, and I love that album so much. It ended up on my end of the year list, and when I saw that they were doing an album with The Alchemist this year in the form of Harem, I was incredibly excited, and I thought that it was a fantastic marriage of these two artists' sounds. Similarly to other rapper-producer projects that dropped this year, Harem sees Billy Woods and Ulysses' form of great wordplay, really cool flow styles, and chemistry together just dance around some really good production from The Alchemist. I feel like the abstract and lo-fi touches, or lo-fi concepts, that he throws into his form of boom bap influenced production fits like a glove over what Billy and Ulysses are rapping about. I feel like a lot of the features on here work incredibly well also, which are, you know, folks that these guys work with a lot. Solidified that I need to get more into Arm & Hammer because these two just create some great shit together. And Harem was easily my favorite rapper-producer team-up that happened in 2021.
She steams herself in marble rooms, courtesy.
One of the big blogosphere bands this year was Black Country New Road, and their album For the First Time was an album that was getting a lot of praise and adoration across the scene, and I also ate it up like a fucking buffet. You know, the intimacy in the lyrics, the, again, tightness within the musicianship. I love their form of 90s revivalism in the same way that I love what Idols did with punk sounds and bringing them into a much more modern lo-fi scope, or what a band that I'm about to talk about also did with, you know, bringing post-punk sounds back into the rock zeitgeist. You know, I like what Black Country New Road were doing on here across the board. You know, I think that their storytelling style songwriting works really well over the musical tapestries that the band is pulling together. I think that it's just a well-constructed post-rock album that has a lot of quality moments in the rich instrumentation that codes this project. It was a really good record and a good starting point for these guys to build off of, and I hope that they do build off of it in some really interesting ways.
What you see is what you get. I still don't.
And Shame's sophomore outing, Drunk Tank Pink, sees them also penning some really good story pieces and reflective songs with these great post-punk dancey atmospheres that I think created a lot of really good energy for the scene. I really like a lot of what this record had going on, and as far as bringing different forms of like revivalism together into an umbrella that hit a really good core with me. You know, I think that the instrumentals on here are tight. I feel like, again, the lyrics are really well nuanced and poignant. You know, I like a lot of what this band's writing about, and I think they do it really, really well. And again, similarly to Black Country New Road and other bands that I'll be talking about later on down the list, I hope they create some really good stuff from here, because this isn't their debut, but it's still a really good evolution into something, and I think that they have a good pocket that they can ride in the future, in my opinion. I told you guys it was coming. Pentadrange created some catchy bops on this Cyber Shadow soundtrack, dude. A lot of the adaptations and evolutions of the songs as you revisited stages were really, really cool. You know, they get like a remix feel throughout the reprises. I feel like the tone and atmosphere is consistent throughout. It's catchy. It's very, very punchy, and it has a little bit of atmosphere creeping in the background at points to continue to set the stage. And the lower key ambient stuff as well, that plays throughout like cutscenes and stuff like that, I feel like is also really, really good. I feel like Pentadrange created a really good backbeat for you to tear through the cybernetic dystopia that you did in Cyber Shadow. Black Midi added more madness on Cavalcade, and I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of that abstract presentation that was seen on Schlagenheim, but made it a bit proggier at points on here. There's some whirlwind cacophony that happens on this project that's a little different from the drones or punchy, aggressive points seen on Schlagenheim. Those moments still crop up throughout Cavalcade and a little more prominence that I enjoy, but I like how they just added more prog wackiness to their foundation in a way that I'm happy to see. I was hoping these guys would evolve their sound in some way, and I feel like they did in a really gratifying way on Cavalcade. I think that it's still a showcase of their songwriting from a lyrical perspective and from a compositional construction point. A lot of the fun accompaniment that comes in throughout this project at points is really, really good, and I feel like they keep it weird at points that I would expect nothing less from these guys. It's again, far from a sophomore slump. I'd say that it's still quality stuff, even if I don't like it quite as much as Schlagenheim. Magdalena Bay's Mercurial World is a great hodgepodge of synthetic nostalgia, whether it's melding synth pop with some G-funk at points, or throwing in some noise pop worship in there, or even just some outright chill wave tunes. This record's waves of synths and dance grooves come together into this experience that was one of my favorite album experiences of the year, as far as taking you somewhere and flowing seamlessly throughout the track listing, having some really good hook work in there, and some bright, shimmery synths to coat throughout the mix. I really like Mercurial World. I thought it was a bona fide vibe at points, and I think that this, again, is a great, promising start for a group that I think could take this and run with it into the horizons. Australian avant-garde band Portal dropped 2 records this year, and I was shocked at that because I was already really excited at the prospects of them adapting their death metal sound into something else really bizarre or out there from a production perspective. What I wasn't expecting was to like their harsh noise record more. While I liked Avow, I thought it was a solid outing. It wasn't nearly as good as Vexo Void or Ion or even Oture, which was my introduction to the band. I thought that Hackbulbia, though, was just an onslaught of noise in the richest way possible. I've been having a lot of conversations about music with people that I work with, and one of the things I kind of said as a joke was, if it makes brain go burr, it gets a thumbs up from me. But in the simplest of terms, when looking at an album like Hackbulbia, an album that is just an onslaught of harsh distortion of so many different varieties, what makes it work for me is the production. The production coats the noise in this just way that makes brain go burr in the best way possible. I know this is an entry that isn't going to be for everybody. It's a very out there pick, but it's an album that I really can't put down. I like disengaging music. I like harsh noise projects from time to time, but very few of them really do what records like Hackbulbia do for me. I loved this thing, thought it was great. If you like noise albums, give it a try.
I pray for Lord to take me. I pray for God.
Speaking of harsh and aggressive, for what I like about records like Caligula by Lingua Ignota and showing Kristen Haters' struggle, I like Backwash's I Lie Here Buried With My Rings and My Dresses for a lot of the same reasons. I think that the production on here is super harsh and dense. I feel like Backwash really has some heart in her vocals. You really feel her pain and her frustration in a way that I love to see artists do. You know, you guys know I'm a big advocate for music as therapy, and I feel like Backwash on this record creates some great stuff. I love her ability to cement the listener in her headspace. I love her ability to craft some great scathing lyrics on here, and I think that the instrumental palette to that does nothing but enrich the experience tenfold. I think that if you like aggressive hip-hop music, listen to this record. I know that it's a record that's been getting a lot of praise amongst my peers that have listened to it, and I implore you, if you like this kind of stuff and you slept on Backwash, give it a spin. I think that it's a great record of pain and anguish and purging in a way that felt very cathartic. I love this record for that, and I think that it's incredible at what it does.
What it is that nigga teeth, skin the color dead, riding in double R. That's that.
Speaking of album experiences that flow incredibly well together, Tyler, the Creator's Call Me If You Get Lost is a story of love, loss, and conflict with some incredible production backing it all, and a nostalgia trip through mixtape land that doesn't sound like it would work with the story at hand, but Tyler finds a way to make it work in a similar way to how he set the stage and created a world on records like Goblin and Wolf, or in a much more mature way like on Igor. He continues to showcase his craft as a storyteller and world builder on Call Me If You Get Lost. It's a record of seeking comfort while going through your own strifes throughout life, you know? But it's also a record of celebration in a similar way to how he did on Cherry Bomb. Tyler gets to show off his comfort and show off his place in the world in a way that you love to see. You know, it's a glow-up record, you know? Tyler on this record flexes his ability as a hook writer, as a rapper by and large, and kind of as a comedian at points still. He still gets to have his sense of humor on this project in its own sort of Tyler, the Creator way, but I like how it comes across on here. I really liked this record, and I feel like I've talked to a lot of people list their hip-hop record of the year, and that's understandable as to why. I feel like it's great. It's not mine, but it's a great showcasing of Tyler as an artist in a way that he's been doing really well in his last couple of releases, and I'm happy to see him find ways to continue to adapt his new perspective and his new era in, you know, glorious splendor. Now, as you guys know, I gave 4 10s this year, more than I have in a lot of recent years, because there were some records that, whether sonically, lyrically, or both together, just hit my brain in a really good way, for their own reasons, obviously, but each of them seemingly different than the last. The one that ended up in the 4th spot is the one that I didn't think was going to end up in the 4th spot, to be honest, but when re-spinning these records and really settling on where I sat with them as far as my albums of the year went, my 4th spot ended up going to It's funny, Jack Antonoff produced one of my least favorite albums of the year in the form of Lord Solar Power. Again, I didn't end up making that list. I might at some point this year if I'm feeling up to it, but he produced that record, and he produced Daddy's Home, a record that sees Annie Clark continuing to adapt this funk influence that she really drew from her time with David Byrne into something very soulful and psychedelic at points. You know, I really like the places Annie takes the sound of this project as a whole. You know, I dig the Bowie-isms, the funk that felt very 70s, but that 60s psych influence still creeps in at points in some of the more lush, lower-key moments that I think also create some really good moments lyrically that Annie shines on, whether she's reflecting about her father or she's creating a stage, setting a scene. You know, I like what Annie does on Daddy's Home a lot by and large, and I think it's a record that hit my ear in a way I wasn't expecting, but this year had a lot of good funk. And you guys know I like some good funky grooves, obviously, and I think this was a really good one. I was just happy that Turnstile made a 10, because as a guy who's been following them since Nonstop Feeling, I've loved to see this band continue to get better with each subsequent release, and I really like Time and Space. So I was hoping that on their follow-up, they would make a 10, but I couldn't even conceptualize what a 10 by Turnstile would sound like, only to find out it's by introducing a lot of softness and some old synth nostalgia underneath. Who would have fucking thunk it? I like the synth sounds on a record. Wow. But I think that the synthesized textures and soft ballad-esque moments create a good pairing with Turnstile's 90s hardcore traditionalism that creeps up sonically throughout their entire discography. You know, tracks on here sound like they're ripped straight out of 1991 in the best way possible, but the production on here creates a good modernization of that, whether it's through that lo-fi nostalgia that a lot of the indie scene chases, or the fact that their drums and guitars are beefy as fuck. You know, I feel like the clean moments also just act as a similar juxtaposition to the stuff on Time and Space, but just works a lot better than the stuff on Time and Space did. This record was a lot of fun to sit through, and it's still one of my favorite just hype-inducing records I heard all year. It was great. It was everything I could have wanted out of a Turnstile release, wrapped up in a really good nugget of fun. Similarly to what Caligula did for reflecting on a lot of dark, abusive moments in Kristen Hayter's life, Sinner Get Ready sees her reflecting more on her time as a member of the church, and I feel like it creates a similar experience as far as setting the listener into her headspace, but does it with so much more theatricality that I think she plays off incredibly well. There's moments on here that feel like I'm listening to an audio play more than I am an album experience, and I love that about it. There's a cinematic scope to this record that I feel like sets it above parts of her discography by a margin and a completely different facet. I like this as much as Caligula, but for a completely different reason. I like the catharsis scene in Caligula, and I like the real pain wrought throughout it, but I love the scope at which Kristen Hayter writes on this project. You really see her owning her shit in the best way possible, and I think that this is such a beautifully constructed experience that is nothing short of perfect. I applaud you, Kristen, and I thank you for the great tunes. When sitting down and looking at my album of the year, like I said on my game list, I've been facing a lot of
grief.
And man, did this record just come out at the perfect time for me.
Ain't no saving me, ain't no saving me or you.
By the time I get to Phoenix is a similar experience to how I felt when spinning a record like Splendor and Misery for the first time. It was a record that just kind of came out at the right time that I needed it. And I don't want to get into it. You guys know how my year was personally. And in a record, and in a year where I was confronted with grief in so many different facets, by the time I got to Phoenix was just a record that cemented where I felt in a complete album package. The whirlwind, almost disorienting feeling of a lot of the production and switch ups and flows just mirrored my headspace. You know, a lot of the sporadic spoken word stuff, the flashbacks and snapshots of the past in the form of Steppa's vocals on here, just really cemented the relapses and grief that I kind of faced throughout the year. Man, this record just is a work of art, and it's a work of art that I really needed. I feel for the guys of Injury Reserve so very much, and I feel like for them to channel where they were so perfectly on here, I respect the hell out of that. You know, I dig a lot of the abstract production styles, obviously, from a musical perspective. I feel like Richie's vocals on here really have this sense of pain to them that hits a really good resonant core. The moments where they add some hooks in there work really well. And this record just rips. It rips and it's sad and it's so good. It's my album of the year because it's what I needed, and I'm sure you all can understand that feeling and can resonate with a record so strongly. By the time I get to Phoenix, is that record for me, and it's easily my album of the year for 2021. But that's my list. What did you think about it? What did you think about my albums of the year? What are some of your favorite albums from 2021? Let me know in the comments down below. Did you like this video? If you did, give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdary content, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified whenever I drop new videos. I almost said albums. I am working on an album in 2022. I have a lot of ideas for 2022, and I'll get into them on Tuesday. Regularly scheduled content will resume tomorrow. I am excited for 2022. It's part of the reason why I just couldn't get list week together. And I hope that you understand. I hope that you're excited for what I have planned for this year, because I'm very excited. And yeah, that's about it. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community. It's linked in the description. My update should be up there today, where I go over not only my plans for the year broadly that I'll talk about on Tuesday, but get into the nitty-gritty of what I plan to drop this month, along with getting my playlist, which will drop next week. I'm excited for 2022. What can I say? Other than thank you. I've been Viral Rack. You guys are good days, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day.